Okay, thank you so much for everybody who's joining us today. Today is actually the third installment of the Work Reimagined series. And in this live conversation series, I'm chatting with people who have reimagined their work so that you can get insights on how you can make work for you in your context. And for those of you who are just joining us, I would encourage you, so pull open the YouTube comment section and let us know who you are. So let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and if there's anything in particular you're excited to learn about today, tell us. So who are you, where are you from, and what are you excited to learn about today? And I'm really excited to have Kiersten and Julian from Rich and Regular, two people who have inspired me so much over the course of my financial independence and entrepreneurship journey. I'm so excited to have the two of you here today. So welcome to the stage. And why don't you let us know, so who are you and where are you from?
Hi, everyone, and hi to you. I'm so excited we're getting to catch up. It feels like forever since we've last talked. I'm Kiersten. This is Julian. We run a platform called Rich and Regular, which is a blog, a podcast, a YouTube channel with a bunch of other stuff underneath it. And we're basically just highlighting our journey to financial independence while we're still in it. And we have a lot of fun doing that. We are parents to a 6.5-year-old, and we live in Atlanta. And we also wrote a book. I always forget the book. Mm-hmm. We wrote a book called Cashing Out, Win the Wealth Game by Walking Away, which explores the intersection of financial independence and the pursuit of a career in corporate America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved that book. I felt like it was one of the best financial independence books and like most inspiring, particularly for people who want to do good in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I ended up sharing that book with a whole bunch of friends to say like this way is like not the way to just keep climbing the corporate ladder if like what we want to do is good in the world. So yeah, it's really, really, really inspiring.
Thank you. That's what we were going for. So that means a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so awesome. So I want to welcome a few people. So we have Black Women Building Wealth from Ottawa here with us today. SWIL Media, so Stacy from Los Angeles and wanting to just hear more about your journey. We have Carrie, who's snowbirding in Florida and interested in hearing how others have made the transition to entrepreneurship. Amber from Alberta, Canada, and excited also to learn about the transition period. I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce this, but Gromfus, interested in hearing about keeping a schedule and moving forward when working for yourself. So we're definitely going to talk about that, of like, how do you both focus on earning enough money and staying sane with everything else that's going on in life, especially with, if you have kids or aging parents that you're helping to take care of at the same time. So I'm excited to hear Julian and Kirsten, your insights specifically on that as we jump into this conversation. We have Samara from Connecticut. And then Black Women Building Wealth says, would love to hear about how to transition from working for someone to working for yourself and what your main sources of income are. And so talking about different income streams and how do we actually make that work? And then we have Seth from Oregon. And learning about the turning point from traditional work to self-employment. Really excited to dive into all of these questions.
Me too.
Before we do that, I want to give people a bit of background on the Work Reimagined conversation series. So I started this series because whether we like it or not, work plays a significant role in our lives. For the vast majority of us, if we aren't financially independent and can't retire early quite yet, work will always play a role in our lives until that point. And so this conversation focuses on how we can make work one part of a rich life, right? One slice of that pie rather than the center of our universe. And the first two installments of the series and those conversations focused on how to make work within the context of an employer. And I intentionally focused the first two conversations in that way because I think there is a perception that you need to be an entrepreneur to make work for you. However, we do know that entrepreneurship is one way to help us to have work better for us. And so I'm excited for this conversation today. So part of the reason why I'm so excited about this conversation is that I have been an entrepreneur now for the last 3 years, and I absolutely love the lifestyle that it gives me. One thing that I will say is in Kiersten, Julian, and I were talking about this before the call, that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? There are also a lot of challenges that come with entrepreneurship, and we want to share some of those as well and how we're working through them. In some ways, I see my entrepreneurship journey though as a like choose your hard kind of thing, that there's a lot of challenging and difficult things that we go through as entrepreneurs, but the heart is different. Like I'm not dealing with toxic work culture and people who are trying to, make me behave in a certain way and, do certain things and being micromanaged and, all of that. But the challenges are different. And we'll go into that. And as I said, I am particularly excited about this conversation with you guys, Kiersten and Julian, because you two have been such an inspiration for me along my financial independence journey and my entrepreneurship journey. And I know that the times that we've had to interact, and I was saying this before, actually, we went live, that Kiersten and I back in 2019 were in a conversation together at an event, a small group breakout group on entrepreneurship, and you were just considering your transition to entrepreneurship, and there were challenges and fears and also excitement. And all of us, I remember, just came around and were like, oh my gosh, you have a message that you need to get out in the world. And like, you can't do what you want to do if you are, wasting your energy working in this corporate environment. And for me, that conversation was really encouraging because I realized like this person who I look up to so much is having some of the same fears and challenges that I was thinking, and realized like, okay, I probably can do this too if like Kiersten's struggling with the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that this conversation will help other people today sort of get that same feeling, to say like, we aren't these like superhuman people who never have fears and don't worry about taking risks and like are 100% happy all of the time. Right? Like there's things that are tough, and we can figure out how to work through them, especially when we can surround ourselves with community. So yeah, all of that. I'm excited to dive into this conversation today. Let me quickly introduce the two of you. So you did a little bit of an intro at the beginning, but I want to do the full on intro. So Julian and Kiersten are the authors of Cashing Out, Winning the Wealth Game by Walking Away. This was one of the best personal finance books of 2023, according to Business Insider. It is also one of my favorite financial independence books, so I'd highly recommend it. I wrote a review on it, and Corey is actually in the comments. Maybe, Corey, you can find that and link to it in the comments for people. They are also the creative voices behind the blog Rich and Regular, hosts and producers of the award-winning series Money on the Table, hosts of the Rich and Regular podcast, and they're based in Atlanta, and their mission is to inspire better conversations about money. They've used frugal living, real estate, stock market investing, and their online business to build wealth and achieve financial freedom. And when they aren't inspiring people about money, they are parents to their son, Bo, traveling the world and searching for their next great meal. And Julian, I believe you're a chef, so that has even more significance for
Yes.
that searching for a good meal is like a legit thing. Like, I'm searching for a good meal and I'm going to go to my like neighborhood.
No, there's a process.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes. So welcome. I am so happy to have the two of you here.
Thank you.
Thank
We're
you.
excited to be here.
Awesome. So let me do a tiny bit of housekeeping for everyone on here before we jump in. So if you haven't yet, and I see a few more people have, just drop into the comments and tell us who you are and where you're coming from. And if you haven't yet, we're going to open up the YouTube comment section, and we're going to use this throughout the time, similar to like a Zoom chat where you can ask questions, you can share perspectives. I'm going to be asking you questions throughout and want to hear your responses in that chat. One thing to note is that the chat is not saved forever, right? And so when someone goes to watch this replay later, they don't get to see all of the comments. So you don't need to worry about anonymity or anything like that. Okay. And then the next thing is, in all of these conversations, if you've been on these conversations before, you know how I approach this. I always ask people to make some sort of commitment to take an action coming out of the conversation today. Okay. And the reason why I do this is because we listen and we pay attention and engage differently when we're expecting to say, hey, here's an action that I'm going to take versus passively consuming something. Okay. So I actually want to turn to the chat and I want to hear from you. Commitments. Are you going to take some sort of action coming out of this conversation today? It can be something big. It can be something small that you can do in 5 minutes, but some kind of action. So drop yeses. I often see pinky promises or 100s or absolutelys in the comments. And so drop those comments below because we want to see that you're committed to doing something coming out of this conversation. And we're going to ask you at the end what that thing is. And so you will be able to tell us. So yeah, I'm seeing some yeses and hell yeses, and someone who just requested cashing out from their local library.
Nice.
They have already gotten a head start on taking action for today. Okay, so then the last thing that I want to do is encourage you to stick around until the end because we have a free special resource that we are going to be sharing with anyone who sticks around called our Make Work Better Self-Assessment Guide. That's going to help you make work better for you. And that's a thank you for everybody who joined live. So stick around until the end for that. Okay, so let's dive in. So one of my favorite quotes from Cashing Out goes like this. So if the fight you're in is rigged, what's the minimum amount of rounds you need to hang in there before voluntarily throwing in the towel? Then, instead of doubling down on your career ambitions, ask yourself how quickly you can hop off the rickety ladder we've all climbed onto. I feel like when I read that, that's like in some ways like a mic drop moment. Like it's like my hair stand on end. And it's like, that is so powerful. And, so it seems like, right, from what I know about you and this, that the part of the way that you've made work better for you was to actually just cash out of corporate America entirely, and become entrepreneurs. Can you talk to us a little bit more about why you decided to make that decision?
One, thank you so much just for, having us and for hosting us and for introducing us to people that we likely have not met or had not heard of us before. I'm going to try to be brief because there are so many reasons why we decided to ultimately pursue financial independence. I'll just pick one, and we spoke about this a little bit from the book, in our book. But it was really just about like improving the chances of success in all of the other areas that were important to us. So whether that's wellness, whether it's just marriage, or being the kind of parent that we want to be to our son, the honest truth was that we just could not figure out a way where we could do those things and be as successful at our jobs as we were for the last 10 years. We couldn't even keep a promise to ourselves to not check our work emails on our honeymoon, even though we deliberately went halfway around the world in an effort to separate ourselves from the obsession or the work obsessive lifestyle that we were living. And so we were already starting to see signs to say, man, this is not going to end well. Fun fact, that was the original working title for the book, which is absolutely terrible. No one would want to read a book that's titled "This Won't End Well." But the spirit of what we were trying to say is that, listen, this is not a path that very many of us should be on. There's very little evidence to support that it's worked. And if you just listen to your body, listen or take a look at a lot of the data and the supporting evidence, much of which we outline in the book, like you really should start exploring a few pathways outside of this while you still have the power and the ability and the energy to do so. And so pickinism, it doesn't matter which one you want to pick. Like those are all of the things that we were kind of feeling. And in part, that was the inspiration for why we ultimately decided to pursue financial independence.
Yeah. Kiersten, I'm curious what you have to add on that.
Yeah, it was the same thing. It was, for me, it was more of a process of accepting that the game was rigged. I think for most of my life, I had done well. I had succeeded in the institutions that I had been exposed to, whether it's school or even just early in my career. I was very good at working my way up and getting promoted. But there was a point where when I looked up and saw what could be next for me, there was no one who looked like me. There was no one who had the same background as me. A lot of those spots seemed to be kind of pre-filled or pre-assigned. And then I started realizing like, oh, I've reached my peak. Even if I go up another level, like to Julian's point, what am I giving up to get there? And it was a matter of coming to grips with this idea that the story that I had been sold around you can be or do whatever you want just wasn't going to happen in this pathway. And to Julian's point, when I started breaking down all of the isms, whether it's sexism, ageism, ableism, racism, nepotism, I was in several of those categories that would likely be excluded for other reasons. And I just couldn't see myself putting another 30 years in the tank of this effort to make something happen. And so once I accepted it, it became a lot easier to understand that if I put the same effort that I was putting into my career, into my financial intentions and planning, I could get a similar, if not much better result over here. And so that was a shift for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I feel like I identify with some of the things that you shared there, in terms of like why I was motivated to pursue entrepreneurship and financial independence in the first place. I think for me, it was, I constantly was like in an environment where I felt like I had to prove myself. And I was like, but I was never actually good enough. Like, it's like I didn't have the right education.
Yeah.
I needed to say yes to everything. I wasn't allowed to push back. I wasn't allowed to set it's like there were consequences if I tried to set boundaries. And my male colleagues would do the same thing. And it would be like, oh, great. You can, set your boundary. And for me, it would be like, well, we can't promote you because you don't manage your work independently enough.
Right.
Right.
It was always something. It's like you need to manage up more, but also be nice when you do it, but also be firm and authoritative, but not that much because now it looks like you're scope creeping. It was a ridiculous game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or like take more initiative, but
Get
don't do things that aren't important.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or like, don't do what you're not, don't do the things that you're not being told to do. Right. All of those things, right. Like it definitely felt like, it was like, how do you win at this game? Yeah. And, for me too, coming at this as someone with mental health challenges too, with depression and anxiety and, just like a lower level of energetic capacity, I think, than many people, I similarly looked at the work environment and said, like, it's not possible for me with this sort of the level of energetic capacity that I have to be able to win at this game and have the life that I want outside of work. Yep. I kind of feel like for many people, I don't think, even for people who don't have mental health challenges and like do have a higher energetic capacity, I still don't see how they can like win at the career game and still have the life that they want. It's like hard to imagine that unless we reframe what winning at the career game means. And I think that's one thing that I'm really trying to, like, that's a message that I want to get across to people, is like winning at the career game doesn't have to mean like you become the CEO and you make the most money and you continue to, increase your income and your influence and, continue to climb that corporate ladder. Like that, I think that work structure doesn't actually work for most people.
Yeah.
And so, so kind of going into that, like this isn't one of the questions I gave you, but I'm actually really curious to hear from your perspective. Like in general, what does winning at the work game mean to you now?
For me, it's the ability to walk away from any situation at any point with your dignity intact. That is winning. That, to me, the ability to have your dignity throughout life and all of the other things that require it outside of work is going to be a bigger contributor to quality of life than any salary, any title, any promotion. It's the ability to walk away. And even though that's my own personal values for my life, it's been proven through data as well. Like you can look at the data of people who have left jobs or have switched jobs, and they end up being higher earners than people who have stayed where they are. Even if you look at the wage lifts that we've seen in the last 3 to 4 years, they're driven by people who were willing to walk away from a comfortable situation and try something new. And so whether it's because you want to have some sort of autonomy emotionally like I do, or if it's just you want to maximize your earning potential, the ability to walk away and having enough of a cushion in either your financial life or your personal life to do so is what winning looks like in the modern career for me.
I would add to that is relevant both for people who are traditional workers as well as entrepreneurs, right? Like that's not something that is just unique to people who are employed. That is a very powerful, feeling to have as an entrepreneur. You want to be able to say, actually, no, going back to the example that I said before, we made a commitment to spend more time as a family this summer. As a result, we're not going to take on this project. We're going to turn that down, as opposed to constantly chasing every single dollar that is offered to you. You want to be able to say, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. And oddly enough, as entrepreneurs, we found that in many ways, that actually just makes you a more attractive, I don't say candidate, but person that people want to collaborate with, right? There's very few things that make people want to give you more money than you being able to say thanks, but no thanks. They just throw more money at you. And obviously, at some point, they say that's enough and they find some other option. But you find that power, that energy works in many ways in your favor. When someone reaches out to you and sends you a note and says they want to work with you, or they were planning this thing and they had you in mind, that's a very powerful feeling. And, your ability to say no, to Kirsten's point, I think in many ways work in your favor, not just from a standpoint of protecting your boundaries, but it also in many ways can lead to you, just having a little bit more dignity in the process of negotiating, as opposed to the lopsided relationship or the lopsided power dynamic. You practically have little to no negotiation power in the traditional workforce. And so that feeling is almost like, I'm going to use an odd metaphor here, but it's like when you've had a cold and you've been congested, that moment you're not congested anymore. And you have this sudden, immediate appreciation for the ability to fully breathe through both nostrils. You take it for granted when when you can do it, but it's not until you realize that you can't breathe through your nose anymore, and all of a sudden you're a mouth breather, which is just awkward. It's the kind of thing that you just have a great appreciation for. So yeah, I think she's spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that this is such a good point. I think sometimes I think of this idea. For me, I think of it as having FU money.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, okay, it's your emergency fund. And it's this money that you have on top of that allows you to take advantage of an opportunity or get out of a toxic situation, or just give you more power to say, I don't need this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to tell you what I do need. And if you don't provide that, and if you don't play ball, I'm going to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, having that power and dignity in those conversations, I think is incredibly important, and really agree that that's important both as someone who's employed with an employer, and someone who is self-employed, because as you said, you get to make decisions that says, I'm going to choose to make a little bit less money, and I'm going to focus on other priorities in my life. And I can do that because I have this financial cushion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So I actually want to turn to the audience for a second. And I actually want to hear from people, where are you in your entrepreneurship journey right now? We're going to dive in a second to hearing about Kiersten and Julian's transition out of corporate America and into entrepreneurship. And so would love for you to just drop a number in the comments. So if you're already an entrepreneur and it's your main gig, put a 1 in the comments. If it's a side hustle, so it's something that you're building or something that you want to keep as a side hustle, put that as a 2. And then as a 3, if you're curious but haven't started a business yet. And then 4, if you're like, I just really like Kiersten and Julian and wanted to hear them share their wonderful insights, but entrepreneurship isn't for me, put a 4 in the comments so we can see sort of where people are in this journey. So I'm seeing some 3s. I see a 3/4. A couple of 1s, so a few people who are already entrepreneurships, quote unquote, full-time as your main gig. And then some side hustlers out here as well. So thank you. This gives us some helpful context as we move into this conversation. So Julian and Kiersten, would love to dig into your transition out of corporate America. And I know it was sort of different for each of you and at different times. So that transition out of corporate America and into entrepreneurship. So what did that transition look like? What did your business look like at the time that you made that transition? And I'm curious, and we'll also probably go into like, how did you financially prepare and how did you emotionally prepare to make that transition? But let's start with just what did it look like?
Yeah, so I would say I got the ball rolling in June of 2018. And it was actually after a set of unfortunate circumstances. I was dealing with bullying from an insecure manager, someone that was basically trying to throw me under the bus. This was as a result of a really hyper toxic work environment. And it just became a dog eat dog environment. And when you're, a new director that has the ability to kind of throw managers under the bus, that's exactly what happened. And so it was really just my turn. Like, that's just how brutal of an environment it was for the particular time and in organization that I was a part of. I always use the example. I use a Game of Thrones reference of basically the ask was for me to kiss the ring. And I absolutely refused to kiss the ring, just given the context or what would have been required or what I would have basically been co-signing to if I had done that. But going back to what you were saying earlier, Jessica, the reason why I felt confident not doing that and instead sending Kirsten a text message and saying, hey, I think this is it. I might need to pull the plug sooner than we'd originally planned.
As in tomorrow.
As in
like there was
immediately.
Yeah.
Because at the time, while our son had just been born, I think he was a little over 1, but we also had a completely paid off mortgage. And we've been working towards that for years. We had a rental property, which was, I think, going on its third. I don't even remember. It feels like so long ago. But we had a rental property that was occupied at the time. We'd been saving, upwards of 40-50% of our income leading up to that point. And so while we didn't fulfill the original plan, we certainly were at a position where we could protect our dignity and our mental health and our name, our character, all of those things. I did not have to take these, for lack of a better word, lashings if I didn't want to. Now, from a business perspective, we were not there yet at all, but we had so much more momentum. And the way that I would look at it is, when you're working in corporate, like very much like your likelihood to get promoted isn't always just dependent on your qualifications. We know that there is a high school element here where it's a bit of a popularity contest. And I was trying to win that game and I just couldn't quite seem to get over the hump. Whereas on the business front, we were winning the popularity contest, like we were growing. And even using another example that you made, I remember being told by a manager as I was looking for certain jobs right around that time period that I was going for a marketing role. And I was told that I just didn't have enough marketing experience. Meanwhile, here I was having built a brand, having designed it myself, having done all these things, getting press mentions. I mean, we were getting, and still till this day, we get more press mentions on an annual basis than this multi-million-dollar company that we used to work for. And so it's odd to me, that I, the person who did not have any of the experience that would warrant me to get this job that I really, really wanted, could all of a sudden apply those same, what we call superpowers to myself and start seeing immediate results. And so we were seeing some income, but it wasn't nearly enough to replace our paycheck. But we weren't really focused on doing that because we were already living on less than half, right? So that part really didn't matter. It was more so intrigue and us having the comfort and the cushion to be able to say, actually, I'm willing to bet, just based on the evidence that we have, that if you keep on beating your head up against the walls within this job, you're not going to get anywhere. And in fact, you're going to hurt yourself and probably ruin your relationship. Or if you kind of healed a little bit, took that time and energy and applied it to your own ideas, and in fact, applied a lot of the skills that you learned, that on-the-job training, and did it in a way that you believed, or that we believed many of the other people that we were, I guess, competing with just did not have. They didn't have the marketing experience that we did. We felt like, actually, we've got a strategic advantage here that we can take advantage of. And so we had evidence, boatloads of evidence to suggest that if we were to reallocate that energy into our business, that we would get a much greater result. And we also had the benefit that there was sort of 1 foot in, because Kiersten was still employed at a high level, and 1 foot out with me sort of focusing on the business. So that's kind of where we were. Highly advantageous position. We understand that, but that's an earned privilege. That's something that we started, years prior. And so while, again, we didn't fulfill that initial mission, we had plenty of resources, plenty of momentum, and we had some logs in the fire. It was really just a matter of continuing to feed that fire and to take it to the next level.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about this, because in some ways I feel like, in so many ways, I feel like we've followed in your footsteps, like the two of you. And so I think my work situation wasn't quite as challenging at the time where I decided to make the transition, but there were some conversations and some you need to be working more and you're not a team player, kind of messages that I was getting when I, tried to set boundaries. And at that point, I think, I had been working on the Pioneers for a couple of years. I'd started doing some coaching on the side, right, as a side hustle.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, it was like, this isn't worth it anymore. There's some baseline level of financial freedom that's already here. We're not FI yet, but I don't need to I don't need to put up with the bullshit anymore. And right, that there's evidence that what I've been doing in my 10 hours a week that I could negotiate, that I was using, right, to build the business, that if I had more time doing that it would, continue to grow and, be a lot better of a situation in the long term. So I definitely feel that. So I guess my next question is, and I guess one thing that I'll also say is that Corey also continued in his full-time job at that time. And so for me, the decision felt easier, right? Because we weren't saying, oh, we're, quitting both of us completely and we have this runway and we're going all in kind of thing, right? It was taking some incremental steps. And for us, I think the decision for him to quit his job was a lot more challenging, and the one that we needed to even more sort of financially and emotionally prepare for. And so I want to hear from you guys about Kiersten's transition as well. And I'm curious if that, if it felt scarier, or just tell me about the process and how did you work through all of the stuff?
Yeah, it definitely felt heavier, but that's because it was my decision and I tend to be an overthinker, and I knew what it meant in terms of income and our household and the way that it would change things. But yeah, Julian left in the summer of 2018. I got promoted shortly after that. And so I had my dream role with a dream team that I built and just had a really good rhythm going. I had respect within the organization, and I had a budget and flexibility and trust. And then there was a reorg. And then there was another reorg. And so 18 months later, my perfect little situation still existed, but it existed in a different part of the company, which means it required me to be a lot more hands-on, rebuild that trust, train a new manager again, and just over and over and over again. And during that time when Julian was working on our business full time, the business was growing, but he was also growing as a person. I think that's one of the things we underestimate, is just when you become self-employed, when you create employment for yourself, which is in and of itself something that is incredible to do in a country whose labor is such a key part of the economy. It's an incredible thing to do, but when neuroplasticity kicks in and that brain starts changing, you become a different person. You grow at a much faster rate than your business does. And so in the 18 months that he was working on this full time, he was a totally different person. He had the nerve to be happy and fulfilled and in charge of his days. And so I would come home from work and be venting for 35 minutes about an email, and he just could not meet me where I was. And, misery loves company. And so that would just piss me off even more. And so the gap between us was just growing and growing on top of this reorg. I think if he had been traditionally employed, I probably could have waited it out more. But between the pressure at work and then not having my, complaining buddy at home, it just felt like I was on an island by myself. And so I did have to do a lot of thinking. To your point, to Julian's point, we were in an advantageous position where my salary at my last job was more than enough to cover our household income and still allow us to build a business, bootstrapping it along the way. But I knew once I left, the business would need to stand on, 10 toes with a little bit of cushion. Not immediately, but within, a year and a half. And so I was asking myself a series of questions that had very little to do with revenue and income, but more so around who I wanted to become as a person. I asked myself what this job was teaching me. And when I got very clear on what it was teaching me, that things should be easy, that I should be comfortable at all times, that I should be able to have a predictable day, I realized that those were not things that I wanted to carry into the next chapter of my life. And then I asked myself what I could gain by leaving. Could I be a better mom, daughter, wife, sister, friend? And all of the upside in those areas of my life made it a lot easier for me to say, you know what, if I'm wrong, jobs will always be there. I will be able to get another job. But if I'm right, I get all of these benefits plus some. Now, keep in mind, this was in 2019, and 2019 was a very good year. It was a great year across the board, stock-wise, economy-wise, consumer sentiment-wise. I actually quit in 2020. And then 3 weeks after I put in my resignation, they announced a global pandemic. So I still had to redo all of the assumptions and the mental work that I had done to build up to the decision. But that was also a really important lesson for me to learn, which is that, there's a lot of rework in entrepreneurship. And that doesn't mean that anything has gone wrong. It's not a personality defect. It's just a reminder that we're not in control of everything. You control your controllables and you surrender to the rest, and you find exercises to manage the tension of that constant, cycle. But yeah, it was definitely a tougher decision for me that spread over more than just, there wasn't this intervention that allowed me to decide the next day. But once I got it, I was committed.
Let me add a couple of details here, because I think it strengthens a few points that we'd made and that you'd already mentioned. One was that we also started to see some business success, right? We started to see end to end. We'd gone through a couple of cycles at this point, right? And so it had been, I guess, 4 years. She walked away and jumped in full time in that fourth year. By then, I was already kind of clicking and doing everything on my own, but we had started to close some big deals. So you start to, just from a business perspective, get a better understanding once you've gone over the cycle a couple of times. We had already started winning some awards and getting recognition. It felt like we were on a rocket ship. The FIRE movement was also something that was starting to pick up steam. We were a central part of that moment in time, with the movie and podcasts and all of these things kind of happening. Dreams literally started coming true. Things that we never would have imagined started happening. And it all felt like we were a part of something. We were a part of something. We're still a part of it, right? And so all of those things, were happening in real time. And so it gave us a boatload of confidence. Again, we'd also, at that point, had a rental property. That had moved into the home that we live in now, turned our previous home, completely debt-free, into a second rental property, which was offsetting our bills. And so we had all of these things. We were flush with cash. The market was literally doing very, very well. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, well, then there's no inspiration there, right? The reality is, after really just doing some rudimentary understanding of economics and personal finance and investing, and I'm going back to 2008 before I even met Kirsten, 2009, basically the end of the Great Recession. The economy had nowhere to go but up. And that was the decision that I made then, was say, hey, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to invest as if it were 1990, something, right? It was an incredible opportunity. And so practically all of my energy and my time. I knew going into my corporate job that, hey, this is a really, really great opportunity. Now, I wasn't thinking about entrepreneurship then, but I say that to say the spoils that we were flush with during that time period, 2018, 2019, 2020, all of the things that we're still benefiting from now started like almost a decade earlier, right? And it was because we started to make those decisions then. And so when we saw even these hiccups now, these downturns now, the pandemic, I mean, again,
Which was not a hiccup.
I'm not bragging.
It was like a
I'm
shove.
conscious of how, it may come across. But one of the greatest blessings was that we were able to, one, survive the pandemic, but survive it comfortably relative to most people. And that, again, is because we've done that work. And so all of these things, I think, are connected, not just pursuing financial independence and accomplishing particular goals, but also being mature and seasoned entrepreneurs and basically being able to punch back when life or the economy or any of those things sort of throw something at you. And so we were prepared for the moment that we were in. And as a result, we were better able to navigate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Awesome. So I want to dig into a question. So we're all coming to this from a perspective of having a partner.
Yeah.
Who, we were able to sort of tiptoe right into entrepreneurship because we had a partner who was still working at the time. And so I want to talk through specifically what tips or recommendations do we have for people who don't have a partner as a safety net?
Well, let me address that really quickly because we get that question pretty often. We do not argue very often, but we had a pretty big blow up just the other day, right? And so first, just off the rip, I would say, let's not assume that everything is easier because you have a partner. There's a lot that comes with that. Now, obviously, we've spoken about the benefits to having one, but that's because we were able and willing to do the work to figure out even what collaboration looks like. So when we were doing real estate, that was a collaboration. And so all of those things helped us to start this new venture. Being literal co-workers and having a general or better idea of one another's work styles helped us to be able to collaborate together. But I would say for people who do not have that partner, move quickly. You have the ability to move a lot more quickly. The decision-making process is that much more streamlined. And so if you're the type of person that overthinks or is a little bit fearful, I would say you're kind of using the one big superpower that you have, or you're almost kind of wasting it, right? If I were single, not that I want to be, I would probably have explored in an effort, and I had the same goals, I would have probably have explored maybe three times as many different ventures as I already have because of the kind of low risk or, not really having to consider another person in that decision-making process. So I think the mechanics of it are all pretty much the same in terms of debt payoff. But yeah, between just moving fast and focusing way more intensely on growing income as opposed to focusing on like managing your budget and those kinds of things. That's important, but that's just one part of the equation. I think growing income, starting is shortening the distance between idea and like launch and scaling. Like, don't overthink it. You have an idea, throw yourself into it. And it doesn't matter if you've explored 15 or 20 of them in a year. No one's going to remember like the 14 that you flopped at. They're just going to remember the one that did really, really well. And it just becomes a really, really great story to tell when it's all said and done. So that would be my advice. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it's similar. Find creative ways to supplement income. We actually did a podcast episode on the overemployed, which are people who have more than one remote job. And there was someone that we interviewed who is single, and she was like, yeah, I used to think I needed a double income, but turns out I just needed to be overemployed. Yeah. And that's just one example. But outside of like the income part, lean into community. I think people who are pursuing a business idea alone, it's much harder to do. I'm not saying you need a full business partner, but at least have your business besties or people that you can have honest conversations with and learn from. Make sure that it's not all just digital, that you're going in real life. We've been to several conferences where people who have a podcast together or a venture together are just meeting each other for the first time at the podcast or at the conference. And so this idea that you have to live near your partner in crime or your business partner or your co-host or whatever it is, get rid of that. Just remember that you can meet somebody who has different skills that you do, and that will allow you to kind of shorten the time that it takes to get whatever you're trying to build off the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually saw that you were already addressing one of the questions in the comments, so I pulled that up. I have a couple more things that I think I would add to it. So, Julian, I loved what you were saying about, like, it's a benefit to have a partner in this situation if you're aligned.
Correct.
But that alignment is not guaranteed.
No.
And so I actually know and have talked to many people who are entrepreneurs, and one person in particular that I'm thinking of who was like, oh, after I got divorced, it was so much easier to like make the decision to become an entrepreneur because I didn't have, I think she called it like sort of dead weight financially, that she wasn't covering the expenses of more than just her, which is, and so, that's sort of the opposite extreme, right? Where someone could be in that situation. But in some ways on this question of the recommendations for folks without spouses or partners, in some ways, the recommendations are almost like the exact same things that we did for like the second person to leave their job. Right? Like to have the financial runway in place, to have built up the business that you wanted as a side hustle, right? Or have a longer runway and more sort of confidence and like know people who have done that sort of business and made that successful. I know there's actually one person who's on here, Carrie, who quit her job and then started her business, but there was a lot of sort of track record of that type of business being successful. And so she knew what she needed to do to make that happen versus, a kind of business that's like completely new, that, not everybody, there isn't like a roadmap for it necessarily. But I think that those are the key things, like have your runway in place so that you can make the decisions that are good for you and your family and your life while you're building your business. And you don't have to be 100% focused on like, I have to do this thing because it's going to make me money. Right. So
pick a business that you actually want to run. I feel like a lot of people jump into businesses that they see online or that they've heard someone they admire do. If you don't want to be in front of a camera all day, then maybe being a influencer is not the right business model. Doesn't mean that you can't be influential somewhere else. But I think a lot of people jump into businesses and then they feel stuck there and then they end up hating it. And you've just recreated a job for yourself versus something that allows you to work in your own strengths and develop as the business grows.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to switch gears here because I want to make sure that we can dig into one important question before we finish. But I think this key question is there, right? It's this combination between how do you structure your days and structure your work so that you both generate the income that you need and two, like keep your sanity and get to do the other things that are important in your life. Right. And so I'm curious, like, what insights do you have for me and for us on like, how have you, what have you tried, even if you don't feel like you're totally successful at it, because I'm not sure any of us feel like we are totally successful at it, but what have you tried?
We've tried everything. We've basically tried to replicate a lot of the things that we learn in corporate America in our businesses, whether it's formal meetings, annual reviews, KPIs,
strategic planning,
dashboards. We've tried a little bit of everything. Where we found what works is identifying projects. So the 5 or 6 big projects that we want to accomplish over the year and mapping those out. We've also learned that planning in shorter stints. We used to do a whole annual plan. Now we plan about 8 to 12 weeks out. And we also manage our budgets that way as well, so that we can unlearn the rhythm of an every other week consistent paycheck to match what our reality is, where our business has seasonality. Nobody's thinking about investing and saving money in November and December. Everything is going to tank, whether it's podcast metrics or blog traffic or, brand partnerships or speaking gigs. Like, because of our income streams, each line of business has its own seasonality, which means that we have to plan our finances and our projects differently. We've also learned that when we create the project list of the year, we can back into when those seeds need to initially be planted. So if we want to create a YouTube series that goes live in June, then we know in January, not only do we need to have some upfront money to pay for travel and editors or whatever else we need to accomplish that, but we also need to be thinking about topics, guests, and backing into the timeline. And then once we do that initial exercise, we can decide where all of the other daily maintenance stuff fits in between. But going from like a, big contents calendar and overextending and over planning ourselves just didn't allow enough rooms for us to hop on trends, for us to really capitalize income streams that are working really well, and just didn't give us the flexibility to also raise our son, whose school schedule also throws off how much we're able to create and deliver in a given year. So we take in a lot of inputs and just think smaller.
I'm gonna add to that with a speed round. So one is, especially today, is just embracing technology more and more. And very similar to what I said before, shortening the distance between when you learn about some tool that could help you and then actually trying it or implementing it. I think if you're anything like me, you kind of learn about it, you think about it, you do a bunch of research, you ask a couple, and before you know it, a couple months have gone by, and that couple months matters, right? And so shorten that distance, just try it. No, just try it. It doesn't matter what it is. Try it, see what it does, see if you can incorporate it into your process, whatever it is, and then embrace it if you find that it's worth it. The second thing is being willing to look outside of your business to find efficiencies so that it can create more capacity for your business. Because the objective here is not about this elusive balance. Like, there is no balance when it comes to entrepreneurship, especially if you want to be a highly successful entrepreneur with predictable streams of income. Like, you have to obsess and focus on that business, which is going to require a lot of attention. And so in addition to trying to find efficiencies within that business, you have to create efficiencies and support systems outside of it. And I don't want to sound like the typical Instagram, YouTube, entrepreneurship guru, but in a way that stuff matters, right? So if you have support, great, use that support or create that support or find a way to fund that support so that you can focus on the business and making that thing grow. And then the last thing I would say is focusing on the metrics that matter, right?
Yes.
Not the 20, 30 metrics, because that's what, it means to be a professional entrepreneur based on your corporate experience. I'm willing to bet there are really only about 3 things that matter. And most likely 1, maybe 2 of those things aren't even quantitative, right? It could be, do you have the right relationship with the decision maker and they know who you are and the value that you bring? That one thing alone could unlock 6 figures worth of revenue for your business. And then all of a sudden your life gets easier. It's just that simple. So focus and don't diminish the importance of building meaningful relationships with people and figuring out how to nurture those relationships. The other thing could be emails, right? Not, traffic or, a social media metric, but email. Like, is your inbox dry with quality inquiries? Like, that's a very real metric. And it might just be 3, but 3 may be all you need a month to create $10,000. And then all of a sudden, that's something that you can predict and groom and grow, that all of a sudden grows. Like, I would much rather hyper focus on the 3 emails from people that reach out to me and say, hey, we're starting this program and we thought of you, instead of pitching and doing a bunch of other things, right? So it's like, you either want to hit, to use a baseball reference, 60%, or you just swing it every single day and strike. And that, because that can be very defeating, right? And so it's about going back and figuring out what worked, who found value in the work that you were already doing, and see if you can find somebody else just like them. And that to me is really just, that's business in a nutshell. But I think because there's so many distractions these days, entrepreneurs get either discouraged, intimidated, or all of the above, and they try to do all of the things. And at some point, you kind of have to do all of the things to figure out what works or what you believe is working, but do that quickly, right? Another cliche, fail fast, so that you can get to the 3 things that really, really matter for whatever it is that works for you. Focus on those things obsessively, and I'm willing to bet you'll see some positive results from it.
Awesome. So I would say these 3 things I actually wrote down as my takeaways, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. But we're going to wrap up here, and I want to invite everybody who's here with us still to share with us in the comments, what did you learn from this conversation, and what action will you take as a result of this? So we told you at the beginning that we were going to ask you an action that you were going to take, and we want to hear what those are. I want to actually share. So I feel like these points that the 2 of you shared toward this question, like, how do you stay sane and make money in your business? And I heard 3 really important things. So one of them was this idea of thinking smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Instead of saying, I'm going to think big and plan this 5-year thing ahead of time, but to actually have these like shorter cycles where you say, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to test it out. I'm going to see what works. I'm going to assess it. And then I get to figure out what I want to do in this next 8 to 12 week period of time that allows you to be more nimble and adjust, sort of take that experimentation approach that's saying, like, I don't have this big master plan. Instead, I'm going to test some things out, see what works, and then I'm going to move forward based on what I learned. So that was, I think, an important point I'm taking away. And then the second one was this idea of efficiencies, both inside of your business and outside of your business, to help support your sanity and your life. And then this last one was just to focus on what matters. Because I think, like, it's, there's this huge tendency of people to say, well, to be a business owner, you have to do X, Y, Z and these 5 million things, and you should be on all of the social platforms and, blah, 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 all the shoulds. When in actuality, like, there probably is 3 specific things that are most important. And if we can focus on just those things and, like, let go of the rest, like, that's going to give us so much more time and sanity and brain space to be able to focus on our lives outside of work. I'm seeing a couple of responses of people sharing the things that they've learned coming out of this. So I want to share a couple of them with the 2 of you. And then I actually want to ask you if you learned anything from this conversation. So someone said they want to re-listen to this and find a good metric to focus on. Somebody set up a appointment with a mentor.
Yes.
So yeah, that's incredibly important. To brainstorm a list of 5 entrepreneurial pursuits that they might actually want to do. Plan by quarters, and take the action planning and overthinking value to heart. So think and then do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually curious to hear, Kiersten and Julian, I know you were dropping a lot of your insights with us from this conversation, but did you learn anything from this conversation?
I'm always reminded whenever we have conversations like this that there are so many people, basically, that we're not alone. That
That's exactly what I was
like
gonna
it's
say.
pretty taboo to complain about things like work in Western culture, because you're supposed to be grateful that you have a job and that, all the things. But it's nice to be in honest spaces like this one where people are acknowledging and holding space that I am grateful, but I got a whole space for like the discomfort and this feeling that there's something else out there. And so it was not necessarily a learning, but a good reminder that there are people, and more so than when we first started doing this, that are willing to talk about what they're feeling and create a plan together to find an alternative.
Yeah, I agree. For me, it was this reinforced that work is just definitively broken, right?
Yeah.
That many of us have unfortunately become skilled at navigating this broken system, or this broken and imbalanced, and in some cases abusive relationship with our employers. And it's okay to call it that. We have these conversations privately all the time, but in any other context, the agreement between the employer and employee would likely be labeled or considered abusive. But we don't call that. We sort of, reserve that language for,
Situations where money
interpersonal
isn't
relationships,
exchanged.
right?
Yeah.
But it is definitively broken. There are communities of people around the world who are expressing that. There are industries that are trying to correct it. There are institutions trying to correct it. And unfortunately, there are institutions trying to keep it where it is. And so, yeah, it reinforced that for me, and I'm glad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think for me, it sort of reinforced the importance that like we need to take control, because no one else is going to take care of that for us.
For sure. And that it's actually getting easier, right? Like, if I'm a little concerned just based off some of the things that we've said, because I get that we can come across as like, oh, well, it was very easy for them. They're very fortunate. But I hope you also, if you're feeling that way, I hope you can also say, or I hope you also believe me when I say that if we were starting right now, I believe it would actually be easier, because there are way more tools and resources and communities and platforms and role models, which did not exist when we were starting out, right? And so you had the opportunity to kind of take some insights from this, whether you want to follow in our path or in Jessica and Corey's path, or chart your own path. I'm telling you right now, you've got way more resources in all things than existed even 5 years ago. And so I hope that is something that's encouraging. It's easier to invest. It's easier to start a business. It's easier to find funding. It's easier to learn. I mean, all of the above right now. And so take that to heart, and hopefully you achieve everything that we've achieved even faster because of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So before we go, I want to share with everyone. So if you're here, thank you so much for staying for the whole thing. We're going to drop a free resource in the comments. And this is our Make Work Better self-assessment guide. And so we know that there's so many things that are broken about work, but we can take some of that control back. And I also know that sometimes work feels shitty and we don't know why, right? We just have this sense of like, oh, it's bad. It's not what or like, it's not where I want it to be, but it's hard to parse out like why, and what could we possibly do to make that better? And so if you're feeling like that, I would encourage you to download that, the work self-assessment tool, because that's going to ask you, I think 15 different questions and criteria to help you parse out like what is an area that I could take action on immediately to make this important part of my life better. And Julian and Kirsten, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your journey with us. I know that I was really inspired by the conversation. For people who want to continue following your journey, where can they find you?
Yeah, we're on all social channels under Rich and Regular. We also have the Rich and Regular podcast, which new episodes drop every Monday, or you can get Cashing Out wherever books are sold or at your local library.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and everyone who's here. I hope you can keep it in mind to enjoy the journey.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.